Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Before we open the meeting, I just want to start with prayer. Lord, you are good. Thank you for continuing to provide all the needs of our church here, Lord, and being so faithful to us, Lord. Help us to be guided by you tonight in our conversations and the discussions about our plans moving forward. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm just going to call Brad up. Brad says he's not nervous at all, so that's good.
You're supposed to go over the agenda with everybody. No, it's fine. Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Paul's the moderator of council. I'm assuming most people know, but he does a fantastic job leading us, and we're thankful for him. So, I'm going to go over just a brief agenda just to let you know kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So, we're going to talk a bit about the strategic framework that we're going to be working within for the next few years here at LEMC. We're going to talk about the bylaw review committee is going to give an update on a few of the bylaws that they've been revising and will be presenting later in the year for you to consider. Carter and James are going to talk a bit about vision about the scattered and gathered and what that means. And even those words, what they kind of mean in connection with their positions and roles. We'll have a bit of a financial update, a few thank yous, and then a time for you to ask any questions. So certainly, by all means, you're welcome to ask questions in the middle, but we're trying to stick to a bit of a time so we don't spend all evening together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategic framework. So if you recall back in 2017, 2018, we put together a task force for the purpose of revisioning our mission and vision statement here at LEMC. And so just to remind you, if you want to go to the next slide, our mission is to lead people in a growing, passionate relationship with Jesus. And our vision is to grow up with God, or grow in our relationship, up with God, in with each other, and out with our neighbors. And our strategic pillars, which I haven't listed there, kind of our goals are to build a church that serves, a church of small groups, and a church on mission. And kind of when we did that work, we kind of stopped just at the top of that pyramid in broad strokes. We didn't get down to really implementing it in the strategies and the activities that we do. And so Joel, if you recall, was our transitional coach over the last 18 months. He worked with us with two focuses, one being relationship renewal and the second being structural renewal. If you recall last year at the ABM, he talked about our structure, which I think Carter will talk briefly a bit about and show you again. But he also spent some time working on a strategic framework, which is really just buckets and kind of more defining how we're going to work towards moving and growing in our mission and vision here at LEMC. And so if you look, we have a package at the back that hopefully you grabbed. It says, Together Revealing Jesus. And this is more just a takeaway. We're not going to walk through all the literature on there. But it describes a little bit about the framework and gives you some context as to some of the goals and activities that we'll be focusing here on at LEMC this year and in the next couple years as we move forward. So if you want to go to the next slide, the strategic framework focuses on 4 key areas. Strategic themes. So Joel spent a lot of time talking to members, talking to staff, talking to council, talking to different ministry leaders. And out of those conversations, different themes emerged. And in connection with our vision, he kind of parsed out what those themes might be. And I'll highlight those on the next slide, but they're in this package here. On the second page, you'll see them. And so those themes are meant to be kind of just a high-level statement of some goals that we have to work towards as we kind of build out the action plans. So from the themes, we also have expected outcomes. So as we work towards growing in these themes and growing in our mission and vision, what things do we expect to happen in our relationships, in our leadership, in our church, and in our body, and in our community? What gets us excited to actually work towards fulfilling these themes? Third is targets and key measurements. An important piece of any strategy is trying to measure how effective you're doing at it and trying to help people work towards something. We're starting at point A, and how do we move to point B, and how are we doing along the way? And so we've built targets and key measurements for each of those themes to work towards. And lastly, no plan can be done without a good action plan. What are we actually going to do? And who's going to be responsible for those various action plans? So I'm going to talk just quickly about the four themes. And then I'm going to walk you through just theme 2 and specifically in all of those 4 buckets, those areas, as an example. But certainly what I hope you do is you take this home, you read it, you pray over it, you consider it, you have conversations with people, and pray for those that are going to be working in those areas. So if you go to the next slide there, the 4 themes that we'll be really focusing on in the next 3 years, and certainly this isn't exclusive to what we'll be doing, but focus areas within our ministry leaders is increased alignment to our stated mission, vision, and pillars, deepened, vibrant relationships, active leadership development, and strengthened, healthy accountability. And so as I said, I'm going to walk through theme 2 there. I think, in this past season here at LEMC, relationships have been a big piece. Through the transition from Pastor Jeff, through COVID, that's impacted so many relationships. We think it's important to spend some time focusing on deepening those relationships, growing together, and the positive outcomes that will result in our body and in our community. So on the sheet of paper there that you have, we have the theme description, for lack of a better term, and then more detail about what we think that means and what we aspire to based on that focus. So I'll read through theme 2 here. So deep and vibrant relationships. We will aspire to become a community with a reputation for authentic relationships with one another and with those in our wider community. We will cultivate warmth and welcome. We will celebrate with one another, advocate for and respond to the needs, and resolve conflicts in love, building mutual respect, trust, and inclusion. So those are the things that we hope to grow in as we work towards the action plans within that bucket specifically. Why do we want to do it? What do we expect the benefit of focusing on that area? We plan to see a more diverse, equitable congregation where every person God has connected us to is cherished and their contribution is affirmed. This will result in a body of believers who are rich in care and concern, displaying deep love and affection for one another and our community. And so that's just an example of that specific one. As I mentioned, the other 2 buckets then are key measurements and targets, which we've also set along the way. And the last piece, which we didn't put on the paper because we're still working through some of those specific things. And the last piece of those is, what are we actually going to do? What's our action plan specific to each of these themes? And so that's the second page of that package. We've really highlighted within action items, we see 3 key areas. What are we going to start doing that maybe we haven't done? What are we going to scale up? What are we doing right now that we can do better and think is critical to the success? And maybe what are we going to stop? Because we can't keep doing everything and just keep adding more things on as much as we would love to. So within the theme of deep and vibrant relationships, your sheet has a list of items. There is another sheet that we didn't share with you that has, the teams it will impact and the people that are responsible for them. Certainly we don't need everybody to hold everybody responsible, so we've left that off. It's the people who are going to help work through those, know who those people are and their accountability people. So for theme 2 specifically, one of the things we want to focus on in 2022-23, so that's just for this ministry year. We're going to keep building on these ministries or these action items over the 3 years. There's a new set for next year and the year after. So one thing we want to start is a more diverse care team. And that's kind of focused around PCCM. Just the other day at our core council meeting, Alan shared just of some of the needs that PCCM has just in the support and the people that they need. And that there's a lot of people in our community both in the church and in the community that needs support. And so how can we build a more diverse care team to help fulfill the mission of that team? A member contact strategy coming out of COVID-19. Certainly COVID's brought lots of different ways of doing things. It's brought lots of people to our church that maybe we haven't met. It's brought people who haven't come back since and maybe are staying home for a multitude of reasons. And so how do we make sure people continue to feel connected and a part of our community here at LEMC? Something that we want to scale up is leaders exemplifying inclusion of others. And so, not just having volunteers on our team that fulfill tasks, but actually involving them in the planning of things, in the leadership of things. How do we get them to be engaged in the roles that they're in? And something to stop is negativity and airing frustration about others. Certainly not something that deepens relationships, rather creates gaps. And so we feel that's an important area as we grow in the coming years to focus on. And so what we wanted to do is more just bring some clarity, bring an opportunity for you to review some of these strategies that we'll be focusing on, to create an opportunity for conversation. If you're quick on your feet and you have questions later tonight, certainly you can, but if it's not tonight, don't be afraid to reach out to council, to staff, to CMLs and people that will be participating in kind of making these things come more of a reality and helping us move and grow in our fulfilling our mission here at LEMC. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to the Bylaw Review Committee. Thanks, Carter.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. I'm, for those that don't know me, I'm Norm Bedard. I'm the Vice Moderator of Council, and we have...
And I'm Jenny Versteeg, and I'm on the PCCM, and I'm glad that you're thinking about care teams and how to help. Oh, two mics. Wow. Watch this. Just push it till you see button.
Works. Does it work? Okay. Okay, so bylaws and constitutional matters have a rather imposing reputation. There are lots of layers, both legal and biblical, secular and spiritual, to sift through.
And it is after supper.
So we thought we'd start with some low-hanging fruit.
Well, way back in 2005, when we became incorporated, we tried to file our bylaws with our 6 council members having 3-year terms, with 2 members being elected each year. However, our lawyer explained that this scenario was not allowed as an incorporated charity.
However, now because of the 2021 ONCA changes, it is a possibility. And we want the members to consider changing the bylaws to allow council members 3-year terms instead of 2-year terms.
The reason we're asking you to consider this is to build more resiliency into our council structure. By increasing the length of term and decreasing the number of people elected each year, there is more opportunity to pass along the collective wisdom among members.
This passing on of the collective wisdom is important because the specialized knowledge of how our church works with both the federal and provincial governments takes time to learn.
This need is not obvious from the pew, or even for most leadership positions in the church, and it takes a while to understand what questions to ask and where to look for answers.
Council members need to know not-for-profit legislation in order to make good decisions on behalf of the church. Our members can make the changes to the bylaws to help ensure council members have time and opportunity to learn it fully.
To me, this change is a no-brainer, just as it was 15 or so years ago. But I've been wrong before. So we started asking questions of key people in the church.
Like the nominating committee, they were for it. They immediately saw that only filling 2 council positions each year would be easier than filling 3. But they were a little bit concerned about the willingness to do a 3-year term.
However, As they thought about it among themselves, they also realized that it takes a year to navigate through all the various jobs of council, establishing committees, understanding and recommending the budget, setting salaries, doing staff reviews.
The nominating committee recognized that it took 2 times through any of the jobs to feel familiar with them. 3-year terms would create a more knowledgeable council.
So we wrote out the bylaw changes that we were considering, and then we immediately realized that there were a variety of ways to implement the change to a 3-year term. Not all would produce the continuity that was the main reason for the change. And after a few drafts, our committee settled on phasing in the changes over 2 years. It worked on paper, and so we sent our draft off to council.
Council members approved it, although we also carefully worked out what it would mean to us personally. Some will not be entitled to a full 6 years on council before they need to take a sabbatical year. We are okay with that. We see the change as important to both council and the church.
So now it's time for us to ask you to take some time to consider whether it's a good idea or not. What we're suggesting is on the handout that you picked up, or will pick up, before you leave.
Okay, so the reason for the part about when terms change at the adjournment of the ABM is to comply with the new regulations from ONCA.
You'll have more time to think about it. Changes to the bylaws require that you're giving 3-week notice before the meeting is called to make the changes.
So that's one bylaw change that we want to do.
And that's, that's the hard one.
That was the hard one, yeah.
The next change we're suggesting is almost housekeeping, and it doesn't require a change in practice, but it is a change in reasoning. It has to do with how we set the date for the annual meeting.
And another history lesson is in order.
Before 2005 and incorporation, LEMC held our annual meeting in February, and we elected various positions and passed the budget, but we didn't have to have an audit report ready for the ABM. We did audit the books, just not with that deadline in mind. We had it ready for the June 30th filing with the federal government.
Now we must get our audit done for the ABM, but with the December 31st year end, we just can't get our audit finalized by February 28th or 29th. So we started asking the members at each ABM to set a reasonable date for the following year that we could make. The last Thursday in March will be that date.
There is a fair bit of work involved to have everything ready by the last Thursday in March, but we have consistently done it now for several years. We often comment that March always feels a bit late for establishing the budget, but it does work.
So the changes we are suggesting are on the second handout that we had.
The reason for the June 30th deadline in the handout is that that's the last day that we can legally have our annual business meeting. So there's no getting around that date. If we simply continue to set the date for the next ABM at the present one, we will have a suitable target date for all reports to be ready. If for some reason the target date can't be reached, council can ask the members to change it.
So if you have any question, we'll be around at the end of the meeting. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Now, we're just going to hear just a short little story from Dave, Diane Brubaker. Woo! Also, I want to say welcome to those who are joining online. So glad you're with us, and thank you, Maynard, for making that happen. Big thumb. All right.
Hi, everyone. We were just asked to share a little bit about our experience in our small group, and we just want to thank Sue and Norm for asking us to join them. We were selling them a hot tub, actually just giving them one, and they invited us over to their small group, and we've been there ever since. So that happened about 4 years ago, and we wanted to join because we had just started coming to LEMC, and we thought it would be a good way to get to know some people on a deeper level. In our small group, we may study a book of the Bible, watch a video series, or a combination of both, often using Right Now Media, and we really appreciate having the free access to Right Now Media.
So we also also share stories, personal stories. We pray for any concerns, and of course we pray for each other. And occasionally we enjoy potluck meals together, and maybe not often enough, but maybe that'll come in the times to come now. COVID kind of affected that a little bit. So our group has just begun a new video series on the book of Ephesians. We will be asked, have you grown in your Christian life since you have come to faith in Jesus Christ? Paul in Ephesians makes it clear that spiritual growth occurs primarily in community with others. Just like in Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Your Christian walk, in other words, your daily life, is to be characterized by unity, holiness, love, wisdom, and perseverance in spiritual warfare. Who couldn't use more of that? So, bottom line, if you're not in a small group, do you know what you're missing? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave and Diane. Dave is also on council and has been terrific there. Good evening. It's good to be here. Thank you for all being here. This is nice. What a great group of people. You're a delight. I'm just going to intro a time both for myself and James to share a couple things and to hear a couple things from you. So last year at the Townhall meeting that Joel had led, he talked about the structure change that has now come to be, James's and I's co-lead roles, that there would be this sort of dual focus on what we'll call tonight, scattered and gathered life in the church. And so James's role for teaching and equipping, and mine on community life, that there would be a focus in these two sort of areas. So the gathered being that this life, sort of the things that we do all together in our gatherings, whether that's Sundays or other larger gatherings. In the scattered meaning, our life outside of church gatherings. So our purposeful relationships with each other, and with our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, or family, the out piece, the in and the out that exist outside of the larger programmatic things that we do as a church body. So the scattered life. So in our gatherings, we have this opportunity to connect with God, to receive from Him, to build one another up, and to be fueled for our daily walk with Him. And so this is really James' sort of primary focus, and in the co-lead role. And then when we're scattered, so when we're not gathered through daily life, Jesus he's got a purpose for our relationships. Right? He's got a purpose for our relationships with each other, ongoing relationships that we have with one another in the church, and our ongoing relationships with the people that we rub shoulders with every day. There are opportunities, immense opportunities, for discipling, for mission, and for community that happen outside of our larger gatherings. And so this is my primary focus as co-lead of community life. And so both of these is sort of gathered and scattered have the same DNA, the same vision, that we would be people taking up the shape of Jesus' life, are growing in our relationships with the Father, growing in our relationship with God, growing in relationships with one another, and growing relationships with our neighbors or our missional engagement. But the scattered and the gathered sort of pieces fuel one another. So our gatherings, being able to be intentionally formed to fuel and to fill us for the things that happen in the day-to-day. And then also the things that we're doing outside of our gatherings, to be able to bring those things into our gatherings to inspire and encourage and cause us to press deeply into God when we're gathered. So for example, I don't know if you've ever been going through something in a relationship with someone in your family or someone at work, maybe where you sense that God wants to do something in you or through you in this relationship with someone. When we have that sense of calling or purpose to be investing in the life of another or being part of making a difference in whatever sphere you're in, there's a different level of engagement that causes when we come to church. Have you noticed that in your own life? Like when there's needs, where we realize that we're so desperate for God to move through us or in the life of another person, it changes the way we worship, changes the way that I worship. It changes the way that I listen to Scripture. There's a deepened desire and hunger and desperation for God when we get together. Like really, it causes us to want to gather, to want to soak in everything we can from the lives of other believers around us, from the wisdom of other believers, and from the things that we can glean in a time of worship and listening to Scripture on a Sunday morning. Similarly, though, as we worship and as we pray and as we listen to Scripture preached on a Sunday morning, we want to make sure that there's spaces outside of our gatherings to be able to follow through on the things that God's been speaking to us. You know, if God's tugging on our heart about something and we don't have a conversation with anyone outside of hearing something on a Sunday morning, if we have no one to process that with, no one to check in with us about those things, we're doing this journey alone, and most often nothing really changes. Right? But when we share those kinds of things that God's been stirring in our hearts with other people, even if those are things that happen on a Sunday morning, when we share those things with other people, it causes actually a growth that happens through the week and in our daily life and the way that we live every day. So we need both. Sunday isn't enough because we're walking with Jesus all through the week, right? We're not just walking with Jesus on Sundays. But also, without gathering together, we begin to run on empty. We need to be fueled. We need to be filled, both from our relationships with each other that happen on a Sunday morning and our time spent focusing and fixing our eyes on Jesus. And so our current structure, the structure that exists really just as of 2 weeks ago, since James has been hired, of the co-lead pastoral structure, really is intended to give priority to both of these areas, so that we can make the most of our gatherings together, our larger gatherings, and that's primarily James's focus, but they're also that doesn't soak up all of our energy that we miss to equip and empower and coach one another in how to walk with Jesus through daily life, and how to form structures and habits in our life that allow us to engage with God and engage in our relationships with each other and with our neighbors in the 6 other days of the week. Now, for a few moments, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our scattered life, because that's my focus in the co-lead role, and then James will talk a little bit about our gathered life. Is this making sense, by the way? Scattered and gathered language? Okay. If it's helpful, if you think about Acts 2, it talks about how they gathered in the temple, listened to the apostles' teaching, but they also went house to house, and they broke bread together, and they spent times in their homes. So there's sort of like temple and home dynamic that was an interplay to their expression of their faith and their growth in their faith, that they did both. But first, let me share what we've been trying recently to help us grow in a scattered way. And then I want to hear from you. This is the active component. I want to hear from you. What has been most helping you recently in the life of LEMC that has helped empower you and prepare you to follow Jesus in your daily life? That's the question I'm going to ask you as a follow-up to this. So first, I just want to share a couple things that we've been doing intentionally to think about how to help our church in the scattered life, our life outside of our gatherings. So you'll notice that recently we've been doing a few, what we've been calling them as living room sessions, or 5 on Mission Sundays, when Joel was here. So we did a Bible study panel with a few people through our parable series to give a bit of like a small group experience, or to show a little bit what it could look like to talk through the Bible with other people, or even to read through, wrestle through the Bible on our own. That was in the summer. We just recently heard stories from people living on mission, like Julia and Brianne and Laura at a recent Sunday. And in the over the last year and a bit, we've done a few 5 on Mission Sundays to hear from 4 or 5 people on a Sunday to hear about how God has been sending them, using them on mission in daily life. Earlier this year, at the end of our Good News series, we heard a number of testimonies from people who are have been part of our church. But most of the time, we don't share testimonies except for when we're baptized. But then there's 30, 40 years of our Christian life after, and there's so many other stories that we don't get to hear. So it's cool just to hear from people who have been Christians for a while, to hear their stories. But the intention of this, what we've been calling living room sessions, is to give space to intentionally pull in the things that are happening outside of Sundays, to bring them into Sundays, to help give a picture of what it looks like to walk with Jesus in daily life, and to help inspire and encourage and empower one another in that journey outside of Sundays. So that's been the intention of living room sessions. So that's been one of the ways that we've been seeking to shift our gatherings to help the scattered life. But secondly, you'll notice that that we want to shape, and I know this is James's heart as he leads our gatherings, to shape our Sunday teaching in a way that equips you, right, for life. So this recent series has been an intention to help build a sense of confidence in Scripture. That for us, that we can think maybe more intentionally about why we trust Scripture, to think about our own engagement in Scripture, to think about our own appreciation or love for God's Word. Earlier this year, we taught the 3 circles in the Good News series at the beginning of this year, with the intention that we would be able to have more clarity in our life about what the good news is, maybe an easy way to share it with other people, and we walked through that for 7 weeks. But we want to continue to teach in a way that gives you tools, things that if church stopped today, that there would be something different that helps you in your engagement with God in your life, with Him in daily life. So now this is the question for you, and I know it might be funny to use a microphone, don't be scared, but for the people who are online, they'll appreciate being able to hear what you say. What has been most helpful recently in the life of LEMC that has helped empower or prepare or inspire you for walking with Jesus in daily life? And if nothing's been helpful, I should maybe be fired. So I really hope someone has something to say.
I've been encouraged by testimonies and just hearing how people are walking out their life with Jesus outside of these walls.
I feel that what keeps me going is a daily reading of Scripture, of spending time with God. Now, I've been an ER nurse. I know what it is. I'm not a mom, but I've been a nurse who's been on call and so on. But that is important. It's more important to me than eating, to know that you are looking into the Word, not only on your own. We use Scripture Union in the home, and we have introduced that to many people. And that's something that's ingrained. We get up in the morning, okay, we have our coffee, but we do have that time, singularly, by ourselves. And it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 6 o'clock, but we do it. And I know it's not easy for families, but it is possible. That's for me. I need that.
Anyone else? Anyone else? And I have another microphone. I'll give this to Deanna, but you can put your hand up and I'll come to you.
I think the Bible study setting at and that we were also encouraged to be involved via text message. But I thought it was really cool working through that passage, and especially because it was a passage that a lot of people weren't familiar with. It was really cool to see everyone's different perspectives and kind of work through it as a small group and as a large group involved. Yeah.
Deanna, and Art, and Isaac, and Marie, who are part of that. Start. That's a good start. Jane, you can be our last one here.
I would have to say that the energy and the joy that my small group brings to me is probably most important. And what I find there is that I see in other people's lives, wow, God's moving. He's doing something. Maybe not in my life, but people give examples. And then I realize, you know, how vibrant this Christian life is. Like, I'm not, you know, over the rainbow every day, but I just mean that these women that I gather with virtually have made such a difference, and it's so ordinary. It's not pious, it's not preachy. We do use right now media, and the relationships are what really make a difference for me.
Thank you, Jane. I think it's an important question, and it's a question that we care a whole lot about. So to hear those kinds of responses are really important to me, and important to James, and important to us as staff, because we do want to know that if church stopped today, that you would be closer, you would be equipped and able and better prepared to walk with Jesus, or to form community. Or if, you know, as happened in the book of Acts and all the apostles were stuck in Jerusalem, but all the ordinary believers were scattered, they shared the word and they formed communities everywhere they went. And what does it look like to be a church where we prepare one another to be so prepared for that? Not just in the case of persecution like that, but even in the daily ways that we sort of step out into different areas of life and in the community. Thank you for those responses there. I think I'm all right for time. I'm worried I'm going to go over here. If you remember the ABM a couple years ago, boy. Okay, second question is I want to know, and this is, again, you don't have to answer tonight, and I want to know when answer if something else is on your mind and you didn't get a chance to share tonight, but what kinds of needs in our community or people groups in our community are impressed on your heart or mind that you have a sense of compassion or care or passion towards, that you feel like God wants you to do something about it? And the reason I ask this question is because I think it's really helpful for us to get a sense of how God is stirring in individuals' lives, and maybe in ways that he's stirring in individuals' lives in the same way, that we can connect with one another on those same causes or same sense of calling. And so I want to hear if there are people or people groups or things going on in our community that are heavy on your heart.
I think just our world is just going through a lot right now, and just coming out of COVID, people's mental state is, I don't know, we've never faced this before, ever, I don't think. And so many people are struggling mentally. Just down the street last night, someone committed suicide, and that happened in our neighborhood. And so this is real, and there's people that are just hurting and so lost and struggling in their minds. So I don't know, what can we do as a church? I know one church actually hired someone just to deal with that, full-time staff. I don't know, our church can't do that right now, but it's something that maybe in the future we have to look at, and just how can we help people mentally.
Thank you, Joyce. Anyone else?
you kind of know about this one, but it's the seniors in our community, especially widows, that are lonelier and just having troubles getting out. And you're aware that we are trying to reach out to them with the work of the 50 plus as we developing that into January. But I didn't want to have you think that I wasn't concerned about it, so I brought it up again.
Thank you, Jenny.
For me, it's moms and parents of kids with special needs. As a mom of kids with special needs myself, the struggle that comes with that, and trying to do all the things as well as find others that you can talk to about it, is something that I find just our community doesn't have a lot of support for. And so, yeah, more support for those either struggling with special needs themselves or for caretakers of special needs.
I've been thinking of the right way to say this. That's why I waited so long. For me, I think it's people in the community that don't have a good relationship with the church, whether they've been hurt by the church and have decided to step away from that, or they just have never had a relationship with the church. It is just really my hope and prayer that people in our community feel loved by people in the church. I think so often non-believers or people who've been hurt by the church look at Christians and see us holding up these super high standards and expectations, and they feel like they're not good enough or can't meet those standards that are expected of them. And it's just so important to me that we just display love in whatever situation they're in, no matter where they're at in life, that we can just meet them where they are and help them to feel loved by people in the church and by people who love Jesus.
Thank you, Beth. Again, this isn't a closed conversation, but I don't know if this is helpful for you. Do you find this helpful? Good. That was the only right answer. So, but it's important for us to be able to share these kinds of things with each other, to be able to resonate with each other, to be able to talk with others who maybe are sharing the similar passions and think about ways that we can encourage one another in that, or find ways to do something. So thank you for those that have shared. I want to just make note of those things. As I finish off here, and James, you got the floor after this. There's two things that I think are a challenge, have been a challenge for me, and I expect maybe is sometimes a challenge for many of us. And those are, what does it look like to form real relationships with other people with the understanding that we could actually be helping them grow in the relationship with Jesus? And so I say that to mean, oftentimes we see pastors as an open door. This guy's going to help me walk with Jesus and grow in my faith. We see small group leaders sometimes in that light, but even in that scenario, sometimes it's challenging to actually, as a leader, to be able to put yourself out there with the sense of assurance that God has a purpose for you, and God can actually use you to build someone up in their faith, that you're not just a facilitator or a host, but being able to form a relationship, whether that's someone maybe that, if you think about one-on-one mentoring, or someone, people in a group maybe that you're leading, to be able to form relationships with people or find those people that you can form what I'll call a discipling relationship with. where the purpose, in the clear stated purpose of your investment in them is they want to grow in their faith, and you're going to focus and prioritize to help them grow in their faith. I think it's sometimes a real challenge to form those kinds of things, and yet that's kind of how the church has come to exist now, is by the multiplication of believers. Right? And the EMCC, one of their statements of the way of Jesus, which sort of a summary statements of what it looks like to follow Jesus, says, I'm helping someone and someone is helping me to be a reproducing follower of Jesus. That what a beautiful thing that by the Spirit of God, every one of us could have relationships like that. Someone who we are open to their challenge and their investment to help us grow, and someone who is open to our challenge and us being able to navigate a kind of relationship with someone where we're able to help facilitate genuine change in their life through helping them pay attention to God, respond to God, and encouraging them along the way. And yet, how challenging that can be sometimes to know how to initiate something like that or to form a relationship like that. The second thing is I think sometimes is challenging for us is what it looks like to actually participate in mission. Sometimes, I don't know if you feel this way, but that we have a certain view of mission or evangelism that seems very narrow. That feels like if we're not boldly going to strangers and telling them about Jesus or praying for healing, then we're not participating in mission, or that if we don't have the courage to do those things, then there's nothing that we can do yet at this stage in our journey. I don't know if I've felt that way before. It's felt sometimes debilitating. What does it look like to be able to get a sense that each one of us is able, maybe in unique ways, to be able to participate in representing Jesus to people around you, whether those are strangers or neighbors or family or friends or people that you work with or go to school with? How do we build this sense of skills or confidence or calling or patterns in our life that prioritize us being able to represent Jesus? If it's not going up to strangers and sharing the 3 circles gospel tool with them, what is it? Because it's not an either or. There are other avenues. And certainly that's not to discount those who do that. I just know that for me, that is sometimes really scary. And I expect maybe 1 or 2 of you feel the same way. But how do we engage in mission if we're not there yet, right? Or if we don't think that that lines up with a sense of personality or calling or gifting? I want to throw those things out there just to say, how can we better equip you in those things? I don't know the answer, but that's the question that I want to find an answer to. How can we better equip you for those things? There's a couple things that I wonder if might be helpful. There's something that's called a huddle, which is kind of like a small group format, but with a bit of a high commitment level and expectation of maybe high challenge. That has been really helpful for me, both on a receiving end and on a giving end, to be able to say I'm helping someone and someone is helping me to be a reproducing follower of Jesus. To be able to have honest conversations about the way God is speaking in my life, to be able to share that with other people, and for them to check in with me. And for us to be able to process things that help us to actually see change in the ways that we're living our life. I wonder if, so this is something that I have been a part of through Claren. James also has been a part of this with Claren in different groups. And then I've been a part of leading with some of our staff team and leadership team through 3DM Journey the last couple of years. It's been really, really helpful for me and really, really helpful for those who've been a part of it. And I wonder, I'm just going to throw out an open invitation. If any of you would be interested in doing something like a 3-month trial of a huddle with me. So that's just, yeah, it would look like a 3-month journey to obedience-based, listening to God together, seeking to build some tools, and then largely sharing, prayer, check in about the things that God's been speaking to you, and then what it's going to look like to put that into practice. If you'd be interested in that, talk to me. I'd love to know. The second thing is, do you have things that you're already, avenues where this is already happening, where you would just appreciate coaching or encouragement or a couple conversations to help you think about your effectiveness? You know, if you feel like you're kind of stuck, you know, maybe you are, you know, you have those clear relationships that exist. You know, maybe you have someone who looks up to you as a mentor, or maybe someone who looks up to you as a leader in their spiritual life, but you're like, but I don't know if I'm doing it well or anything's changing. Would you appreciate coaching? And on a broad scale, again, the question is, what can we do better? But if you have any responses to either of those questions, huddle or coaching, I'd love to hear from you later. Thanks. James.
Thank you, Carter. I love Carter's passion for that, seeing everyone impacted and activated and impacting your community. And I would just add to that, my experience in a huddle with Claren was really life-changing. It changed the way I did ministry. And I'll tell you, I saw incredible results with the people that I went through and that I was able to be in a huddle with then, and they're still doing it at Wilmot. They've continued on those people because it changed their life. It's just a deeper, different way of discipling that there's so many tools. So take them up on it. Carter's a great person to do that with you. So what I want to just share right now about the Gathered is I've had a week and a half to kind of gather myself, get my feet settled here, start to explore, learn a little bit more about this community, and there's so much more to learn. And then I get to share with you tonight, and so I'm going to be a little bit briefer. I haven't had as much time to really dive into it like Carter. But there are 3 things really I want to kind of do. There's a concept, there's really kind of a picture, and there's a story I want to share with you to try and illustrate and explain what it looks like when we're gathered. And the picture is the idea of when you have one candle burning, it's pretty actually significant. You can actually see it from 2.5 kilometers away, they say, on a dark night. One single candle burning. As soon as you start to add more to it, the flame grows, right? It gets bigger and bigger. If you have a big bonfire, that can be seen from many, many, many kilometers away. That's why sometimes people get the fire station called on them because they have a huge bonfire and everyone in the whole town is concerned because they can see it, right? But it's that idea that you burn brighter together. You still burn on your own and you'll impact, but when we're gathered together, the flame grows, right? And it's that much more intense. The heat will radiate further out. It's visible from farther away. And so that's kind of the picture I want to start with, is this red hot center. And that's what it's like when we gather here. It's like when we gather together. That's what we're trying to do, is to ignite that flame more in each of us. And so I wanted to read this passage too, Matthew 5:14 and 16. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so it's that same idea, that light. It's visible, it's seen, it's impacting people. But there's a concept there too about a city on a hill. It's gathering. It's that gathering of people together. And so when we come together and we're gathered in the bigger gathering, we're like a city. That's what the Bible kind of calls us. We're a city. And there's so many things we do together in a city. We need people to help with so many different things. We are able to provide so many services to people. We're able to do some incredible things together. I don't know about you, but I'm always revived And it's amazing to come here and just be part of worship. When our worship team, when they're up there and they're praising, I already feel revived. I feel energized. But we need people to do that, right? So it's about building it up, building that kind of that structure, that city, where that flame can grow. And so that's the verse, that's the picture, that city on a hill. But now I want to share a story of what that looked like in my life and in the life of a couple of my friends this year, and how we saw it impact people. And so the vision is that our time together, gathered here, ignites us and equips us. And Carter hit on that a couple times, that equipping. What we're doing here should change what we're doing out there. Okay, that's the key. And so the short story I want to share took place back in April and May. And we had Pastor James Park at Wilmot was doing a series on being a witness in your daily life. And so he was really challenging us. So we'd come, and on Sundays he'd challenge us with some specific ways we could live out our faith as we were scattered. Okay, and so, he was sharing about how do you share your story with people? How do you meet them where they're at? He was sharing some of those things as we were together. And he shared his testimony, and it's a powerful story because he was actually far from God. He was addicted to drugs. He was really not living a good life at all. And one day in a coffee shop, someone else who lived on the streets, because at that point he was in between places, came up to him and told him about Jesus. It was the last person he was expecting to hear it from. And that changed his life. Just that person being willing to share. And so as he was sharing about that, and that was a part of the series we were going through, I was also in a group, a missional community, which is like a life group, but bigger. There were 42 of us that would gather. And we were intentionally trying to find ways to then impact our community. So we did some community skates. We did some, I'm trying to remember what we all did. We actually did meals for people on the streets, and we went out and handed them out. And so we were just trying to find ways to make contact points, along with what he was preaching at the time. We were trying to do it. And what happened is there was this one gentleman, and his name was Sean. And I knew him from far back, and a couple of my friends knew him from high school. And we started to invite him out, and some other friends and some other people we knew who weren't Christians, but we just wanted to do life with them, build community with them, provide opportunities to try and live out some of these things we were hearing on a Sunday morning. And he kept coming. And he kept coming. Invite him over to watch football, invite him over to do things. And then one night, we were watching the Leaf hockey game, and he asked us a question because he saw something different. He saw a light. We were letting off something different than what he was seeing. And he asked us this question. It's amazing when people provide you the opportunity to share. He said, COVID has been hard. He said, I feel like I don't have a community anymore, and I don't have a purpose. Those are his words. Right in the middle of the Leaf game, we're like, whoa, this got heavy. This got, okay. And he said, how did you get through? And we were able to share with him about how our community, about how our Christian friends walked us through and were there for us. And he wanted that. And so right there, we're watching a hockey game, and we're walking out what we've been learning on a Sunday morning. What our pastor's been teaching us and preaching to us about, igniting us with, getting us excited about. We have the opportunity to walk it out. And we prayed with him. He accepted Jesus during the intermission of the hockey game. It was the only good thing that happened that night because the Leafs lost horribly. And it was wonderful. It was incredible. And that is exciting. That gets you excited. But it flows out of the Sunday morning. Everything is interconnected. And for me, that's kind of the vision when we come together. What we're doing here empowers you and changes what you're doing out there. And it'll happen. And so that's why Carter and I, too, we've talked about this idea of missional. It's a part of both. When we're gathered and when we're scattered. And so kind of like three things that we want to see happening when we're gathered is this idea of being motivated. We want to motivate you. We want you to get fired up. We want there to be passion to what we do. And we want to mobilize and we want to equip. These are some of the key focuses when we're together on a Sunday morning. And then we want you to be so hot in three areas of up, in, and out that you're prepared for the scattering. You're ready. When you're here, we want that flavor being enhanced. I talked about when I preached here last time was saltiness, the flavor. Your flavor gets enhanced when we're here together. And then the world should know us by our love for one another. So when we're together, we're connecting, we're blessing, and we're sharing. And that community is something the world sees. It's different, and they want a piece of it. So some things that we've been doing and trying to help build up this city on a hill, this place as we are gathered, is just we've now been doing some team up days. There's one coming up in 9 days. Yes. And I get to be a part of that, where we're trying to invest in and build up our teams, get them together, get them connected. We really want to focus on teams, doing things as a group. We're better doing them together. We don't want you alone, having to serve on your own. We want to connect you with others. So that's a big focus right now that we want to work on. And then investment in volunteers. We want to be offering you tools to do what you're doing well, to train you, to do things like that. I'm excited to hear how many people are using Right Now Media. That's a neat tool that it's great to hear how many of you are utilizing it. So that is exciting. So those are just some of the things that go into a Sunday, the gathering. But gatherings can take a lot of different forms. But every time we come together, we want to be fueling each other. So here's some questions that you can either answer right here and now, you can take with you, whatever it may be. How are you a part of that flame? How are you a part of that flame? Many of you are serving currently. But how are you involved? And can we get you involved? How can we better invest in you so you can do a better job in whatever you're doing and however you're a part of this community? And maybe that's one too, that we really do want to find the best way to help you. So if there are some brilliant people here right now, so if you have some ideas, we want them. Different ways that we can help make you better. We can invest in you. And is training working for you? Some of the things that we have done. So I would just open it up right now just to hear some feedback on how is it going? What is it like as a volunteer, someone helping, or even someone who's coming? What are some suggestions you might have in how we can better invest in you? So I have a mic here ready if you are willing to share. Or even it could be something that you think has gone well in the gatherings that you would like to see more of. What do you think? Yep. These are different than I'm used to, but I think I hit the right button.
I have not really looked in our library to see what resources are there about being missional, but I know I access stuff myself in different places, and I think that the church could put something out there so that, you know, there would be a table or whatever where books could be borrowed, because there's some great stuff on how to be missional. But I mean, I don't know what resources you as pastors use, but they're different than what I read, and not everybody's a reader, I know, but there has to be some broader source for teaching or training or whatever you want to call it.
That's great. Thank you, Jane, for sharing that. And that is like, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was in there with Laura, I think this morning, weren't we, Laura? And we were just looking at that. And you want to share next? Okay. And we were just talking about that. What books, what resources do we have? And actually, we talked about that topic on missional, so I was just looking through there to see for myself. But to bring them out, to have them there available, to make it clear what there is when this is such a big focus. And I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Would you like to share?
I just wanted to say that like the youth being involved in so many different areas, that always makes me really excited. Whether like in the nursery, in like any of the kids programming, or doing sound, or handing out Bibles, like that, like it's really cool to see, and then encourage them to keep going.
Amen to that. They have a purpose, they have a place, they're an important part of this community, and the more we can do that, the better. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share something?
Maybe I'll just add something that, sometimes I feel that the church globally can make it too hard. They make it sound like there's a prescription out there. If we just could grasp it, we could do it. And I've been reading a book on volunteerism, and it says, be a doer of the word, and, go and love on people. You don't have to go out there with the goal to convert them or whatever. Just love on them. Just be a friend. And I'm learning that. Like, I had the other form of thinking before, and I feel freed from it, because we all need to go and just be Jesus.
And I think that was the one thing I learned in that, what I shared about my friend Sean. We were just bringing him into the group, being friends to him, and then he initiated from there. So you're right, sometimes we overcomplicate it. Thank you for that reminder. Would anyone else like to share? I'm missing a hand. Okay.
I don't know about everybody else, but I always appreciate a really good worship time. If we could have an evening of worship with prayer and testimonies, or just plain old worship, that just is what moves me.
Thank you. I know that's one of my wife's favorite things to do, too. I see another hand. Yeah, it's great.
I've got the chance to be a part of the MC team for the last, I'm not sure, a little bit. And it's been great. I've always been maybe surprised, I would say, at the trust that leadership has put into us, of going up there with, some bullet points, and then just kind of like go do your thing. And I think that that's good, and that we shouldn't get rid of that, because we don't. If the Spirit is moving, we can't just. I don't think the answer is to give like a full script. I don't think any of us who are on the MC team would super love that. Yeah, and so I guess I don't know exactly what practically this would look like, but maybe a little bit more, I don't know, structure, communication, or maybe even just a reassurance of knowing that, yes, that went well. Or I guess I can't speak to the other MCs, and this is something we can maybe talk about more at that team up meeting, but I'm always scared of saying the wrong thing. Like, oh, did I say something that actually doesn't totally agree with our church's views on that? And so maybe just a little bit more clarity on that, and what the church is looking for from us in that.
Thank you for sharing that. And you guys are in a front and center role. So especially now that we're streamed, I can see the extra pressure on anyone who's emceeing. But yeah, just more feedback, more support. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
I obviously haven't been to too many services so far, but from our experience coming new, one thing is just like everyone has been so amazingly welcoming, and I think that's a huge thing for people who are coming into a church. We felt extremely welcomed. And another thing that I've really loved and valued is actually the MCs, the jobs that they've done. We've watched a bunch of services online too previously, and even just this past week, I think a lot of churches now, it's all just about like producing facts, but even just having the prayer for people in the church, like Jim just feeling that emotion. I'm like, I don't even know Jeff yet, but I was like feeling for their family, and I just felt like that was a really beautiful moment. So I really loved that about how you guys share personal stories about the people who are here on your Sunday morning.
Thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share yet? Yep, I see your hand.
One of the things that I've really found as a volunteer, like when I teach Sunday school, often I would go home and Jim would go, oh, it was such a great service, and he would talk about this or talk about that. And the great thing is now, as volunteers, when we're not in service, we can go online and watch. And I found that I've really enjoyed that.
I know when I was doing youth downstairs or helping with Sunday school, you can feel very disconnected very quick when you hear everyone else talking about the messages. It is a blessing now to be able to go back and be a part of that. Anyone else? I'm getting my steps in. All right, well, thank you for sharing. And if anyone else has any feedback, please let us know afterwards, or an email, or come into the office and talk with us. We're here. We'd love to hear from you. So I think at this point, I am supposed to hand it over to, who am I handing it over to, Carter? Come on up, Brad.
Perfect. Thanks, James. So my next task is to just give a brief update on finances here at LEMC. So before I go in, thank you guys so much for just sharing those, for engaging with us. We're excited for James to be on board here, and Carter for what that means for you in your transition to the role. We're thrilled with the blessings that God's given us from our people and all the other staff that are part of the team as well. So finances, we were able to put together a little package here. Thank you to Janice, Andrea, and Merle. You guys are amazing. So thanks for all the time and effort that you guys put faithfully into leading the finances here. It's a big job, so thank you. But yeah, what we wanted to do is just give a brief update. I think we've had a few questions over time, how are things going? Typically we do it once a year at the ABM, and so we thought we'd maybe just, share a little bit about where we're at, and also just a little bit of where we're maybe going in the next couple years here at LEMC, or where we see we might be able to go. So the budget is more just, I'm not going to go through it line by line and talk about it. It's more just for your information and to give you a high-level overview. And help frame some of the conversation that we're going to share here. So from a finance perspective, I think generally it's just a positive story. God has been continually faithful, and the membership has been continually faithful in supporting LEMC and helped us to be in a really healthy position. I remember back in 2019, I believe it was, we paid off the mortgage, which was a big cause for celebration. And who would have known that having that year between that time and when COVID came, to build up even a healthy reserve in the church with all the uncertainty that COVID brought to the economy. We're just thankful that God provided for us in that way. And then just the continued good stewardship of our council at that time, our finance team, our staff, and resources. We've been continued to be able to run a balanced budget even through all of the last couple years. Just want to highlight a couple things. So our average giving back in 2019 was around $460,000 from a donation perspective. And the past 2 years, we've averaged around $415 and trending in a similar direction this year. Over the last couple of years, we also had some subsidies that were able to help subsidize some of our staffing costs through the government, which helped us keep that balanced budget as well. And it's allowed us to maintain a healthy bank balance. At the end of last year, we had 192,000 in the bank. And to give some context to that, I just wanted to, we were talking with the finance and saying, it's a healthy balance, right? There's a good amount of cash, but we also run a budget of about 500,000 a year. And so we feel on a stewardship side of things, it's wise, a council to keep, a reserve in there in case something was ever to happen or in case opportunities arise. We've had capital projects like the furnaces continue to expand past their useful life, which we're thankful for, but that's a big expense one day. And so, a lot of that has been placed strategically by the finance team to be able to subsidize some of those costs that come down the road. And so, even beyond that, we feel like we've been in a position of excess. And so when we talked about the budget in 2022, we purposefully actually built a deficit budget where we anticipated spending more than we would bring in, knowing we had a reserve, and specifically focusing a lot of that on an investment in our people. We built a structure with 2 co-leads like we've never done. We know that youth are important from investing in them, and so with Carter shifting, what would that look like, and who's going to look after that role? And it's been, I think there's a shift in just the world and in people's time commitments, and so moving from a heavily volunteer-based to maybe a more staff-based structure in some of these core ministries is an important thing as we move forward. Certainly lots of people continue to give time as a big resource as well, and we're thankful for that. But we've seen shifts in some of that over the years. And so what we wanted to do is just talk a bit about understanding that we have this deficit budget that we've planned for this year. We've actually been able to maintain that pretty well. But we anticipate that we might run a deficit budget for a few more years as we invest in our staff and as we invest in people to help us fulfill our mission, because we think people are what are going to do that. And so there they are. If you think, as at the beginning of September, we only had 4 of them, and now we've got 7 of them, which is a testament to God's faithfulness as well. Yeah, absolutely. So I think 3 takeaways, if you want to, just from a brief conversation that we just wanted to more start letting people kind of understand and think about. 3 takeaways, I'd say, 1, we are in a healthy position, and we're grateful for your continued faithfulness and support to LEMC, both financially and with your time. 2, we felt, and finance connected with us, that this was a good time to invest in people to help us move forward in our mission and continue to grow. And we don't know what the next, that's part of the strategic framework and planning as well as, what are those next hires going to be at a time that is right. And lastly, we understand that this may mean an unbalanced budget for a time, and that's what we've anticipated based on the blessing we've had. But we're not the federal government, and we will work towards a balanced budget again at some point. So that's all I really have from a finance perspective. I don't know if anyone has questions. I would 100% give them to Janice, because she knows a lot more than I do. But and as mostly, I just wanted to give, just a brief update and a thank you to all of you for your continued support. A big thank you to God for His faithfulness in this tricky season. We know there's still more uncertainty to come, but we trust that God's going to continue to provide for us as we move forward. So I think that's all I have for that.
Thanks, Brad.
Paul's just questioning some math, which is good. No. Yeah, so when I talk about this reserve of 3 months of expenditures, it's just saying, finance actually puts that aside into a reserve fund that even earns us some interest, which might actually mean something now compared to the past few years. But it's just a way to just ensure that we have some contingencies there to ensure that, should things shift in the economy, should people not be in the position to be able to continue to support us in the same way, that we have the ability to continue to pay our staff, run the building. And while we know, that the 192,000 is not 3 months worth, it's actually more. That's why we feel we've been able to take the, I want to say the plunge, but invest in a manner that's greater than maybe what we're bringing in for a season, to say, hey, we expect that the return on the investment in people will be part of the fruit at the end of the day. Does that explain it better?
Thanks, Brad. Maynard, do you want to come up here? Maynard's... Thanks, Maynard.
Good evening, everyone. So, just going to be short and brief, but we thought since we had this opportunity with everyone in this setting, we thought we'd share some plans we have. As you know, we'd like to do things with the stage and the layout every now and then. We like to change things up, but right now we've got, we got some wood, we got some green, and we got a bit of a patchwork going on. And sometimes it gets kind of small. The term I heard earlier, living room sessions, is that the term I heard? Yeah, so when you get a interview going on up here with the full worship team, it gets pretty tight. When there's a baptism going on up here, that it gets, there's instruments and people precariously close to the tank. So we have some ideas that we've been kicking around for quite some time now. This doesn't just come up in the last week or two or three. The idea we have is to remove the wall, rip the wall out completely, and make more space. There's quite a bit of space behind there. There's storage. If you've never been back there, it's usually full of clutter and mess and anything and everything. We have extra storage space over in off the prayer room. There's a large storage room that is full of stuff that half of it needs to disappear, so there's lots of room in there to put in the stuff that's behind there. So that's our what we've been thinking and talking about. A bunch of us have been playing around with this idea for a while. It hasn't really gone anywhere, basically because of the lack of someone to make it go somewhere or help it to go somewhere. So council called me last week and wondered if I'd lead this, and I said yes. And so here I am. So that's what we're thinking, is to, remove the wall. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a mishmash now. Everything would go black. The walls would go black. How far we go, we don't know yet. We're going to get feedback from people, I'm sure. Do we go to the edge of the stage? Do we go all the way? I don't know yet, but the idea with black is then you can do whatever. Lighting, we're going to do some changes with lighting, and opens it up for productions to, not to say it has to stay black, but you can attach stuff and hang stuff and that type of thing. So that's kind of what we're thinking. It'll give us more space. Obviously, the screen is, you're going, okay, we tear that down, our screen's going to disappear. So yes, we have to buy a new screen and hang a new screen. Basically where it is now, it might be back a little further. It depends on what we can work with the projector. It opens up the possibility of a motorized screen so that we can raise it out of the way if we want to. Not sure if we'll do that, but it does. We have the option of doing that. So if we wanted to do a big production that didn't involve a screen, we could open that all up as well. So yeah, that's the mock-up there. That's I'm not sure who that is on the stage there. That's not really a great scaled drawing, but it's just kind of an idea. So that's what we're thinking. If you have ideas and thoughts, talk to me, Dylan. Mike's been involved. Jeff is becoming involved. He went through the same process at Wilmot. James, sorry. What did I say, Jeff? Did I say Jeff? Okay. I didn't say John. John is close, though. Oh, boy. Okay. So he went through a similar process at Wilmot Center and helped out, so he has some wise input, and he's going to be involved in the process, too. So if you really dislike the idea, go easy on the new pastor. Talk to us, don't rip into him too bad. But. So that's about it. Yeah, any questions right now or concerns? shout them out if you do. If not, we'll take it from there. We'll go from there. How's that? We good?
Thanks, Maynard. So there's going to be a question time in just a moment. Before we jump into that, which Jason's going to lead. Thank you, Jason. So again, that can be about anything that was shared tonight. And I don't know if you want to think about if we have a timeline that you wanted to clarify, but I went too long, so we're around 8:30 now. We should probably not end at 8:30. Before we jump into the questions, though, I just want to share a few people in our congregation just to give thanks for some people who might not ordinarily receive thanks. Now, whenever we do this kind of thing, it's really challenging because there's always going to be people missed. But so I'm sorry in advance. Oh gosh. But I do want to acknowledge some people that we haven't acknowledged. Now, first, these are not volunteers, but Abe and Anna Neufeld are finishing up in 3 weeks as custodians. So they're still here. In fact, Abe's right there. And so we love them. Just obviously so appreciate the way that they've served as a family. And we're thankful for them, but respect this decision in their life. And so we just want to give them thanks. Can we just give them a hand now? Yes. So we'll give thanks for them when they're all together. That'd be good. But that was just recently. We'll share on Sunday as well. So obviously we will be hiring and posting for that role ASAP. So we'll be sharing about that on Sunday. Additionally, Mike Snyder served as worship director for 1.5 years. And stepped down earlier this year, but he did such a fantastic job, and I don't know if you all even know maybe all the ways that he did, but he mentored 3 people into leading teams. He hosted many of them actually at their home to practice, some of them to record. Josh actually put out a single recently. And so invested them as musicians and as people, and was on for very consistent sequential Sundays for a very long time, and a lot hung on his shoulders. And there was a huge gift for me, especially before James was here, that was not hanging on my shoulders. So I just wanted to recognize Mike, because he kind of served in that role, but served very quietly in that role because he wasn't leading teams per se, but he made some really, really helpful shifts in the way that worship teams were done, and mentored those guys into their roles. So that was so awesome. Can we just give Mike a hand? And he didn't want to be acknowledged publicly, but this is like a smaller gathering, so it's good. Want to share too just a few, and I'm going to throw all these together. But Janice and Andrea work so hard in finance. Andrea, I don't know if Andrea Barham-Hill has been serving in finance. She's here every week, which is cool. I mean, she's it's nice. She's always pleasant to be around. It's good. But and Janice, of course, they work their butts off for us. So they're just so awesome in finance. Yes, please. There's a couple who aren't here tonight, but Trudy Wall and Maria Clausen. Maybe names that you don't know, but they helped organize a number of summer events that happened here on Sundays. Any of the special things that happened afterwards, they were sort of spearheading that, and they just jumped into that fresh. Had never done that before, so I just wanted to acknowledge them, as well as Maynard and Ray and Dylan. Dylan on staff, obviously. Maynard and Ray volunteering. They're here like every Sunday to make live stream happen, and we take that for granted, that we can watch Sunday if we're not there, that we can, that tonight, 3 hours ago we called Maynard and said, hey, can we live stream tonight? He's like, yeah. And make things, they're just so reliable and have done such an amazing job with live stream. So huge thanks for them. And lastly, just want to share just a thanks for our gardeners. Yeah. So Dave and Diane Brubaker have been doing that a lot this year, as well as Murray Reeser continues to do that. And they do just such a wonderful, wonderful job. Actually met people in our parking lot just a little bit ago who were like, hey, she was actually the banker at TD for the Benevolence Fund. So anyways, kind of knew her. But she came with her husband. They live over here, and they just came to walk through our property because they did their evening walks through our property just because they enjoyed the gardens. And it was nice. I mean, I had a great conversation with them that night. Actually, Alan was there. I don't know if I shared this story with him, but just such a beautiful thing that we often don't acknowledge, but we all appreciate it internally. Just want to acknowledge them, so thank you. That's all. Jason.
So I'm supposed to open it up to questions, not for me, but for anybody else that was up here tonight, or anything you want clarified. And if you want to go home, don't ask too many.
Is the plan to continue with these town hall meetings on some type of, I don't know, frequency, or because the annual meeting, that's a long time between meetings to learn anything?
I can answer this one. Oh, yeah.
I just asked if they were going to continue with town hall meetings on a sporadic basis, because having just an annual meeting means there's not much opportunity to gather and hear what's happening.
The simple answer is yes. This time of year, every year, I think we're going to aim to have a town hall. I guess last year was the first one, but we're going to try and continue to do it each year.
At the start, we were talking about the strategic pillars. Brad, you mentioned that we wanted to build a church that serves. And then towards the end here, when you had the picture of the staff up, and you kind of intimated as there was more to do, we would hire more staff. And those two seem to be moving in opposite directions. A church that serves and a church with all kinds of staff and planning to add more. And so I'm just a little bit curious, which way are we going? To being a staff-run church or a church where people serve?
I can answer, I think, how Brad would... Oh, do you want to answer? Okay. This is what Brad's expressed this before at council. Not so much with the intention to discourage serving, but recognizing that there has been a shift in busyness. In culture. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just too young to speak on this. I don't know if you feel like the same thing has come to be, but I will say I think the average person spends about 5 to 7 hours on their phone in a day, which is 5 to 7 hours less than we used to have before we had phones. So there is a bit of a cultural shift in people's willingness or availability or consistency to serve. Certainly there is not an intention to discourage serving. There is an intention that our staff would be equipping and helping people to make it easier for there to be involvement of volunteers. Like, certainly there's no intention to remove, to make it harder for volunteers to be engaged in the important conversations, engaged in the important work. Our intention is to make that easier and more effective. However, trying to pay attention to some of those trends. That to say, for example, to expect volunteerism to function the same way now as it did 30 years ago, to maybe be open to having a different perspective on what is an okay expectation to expect from people. Is that fair, Brad, to what?
I think even like connected to the youth coordinator role versus previously, you know, it was a youth pastor role, it had to be pastor, and if it wasn't, it was just going to be a volunteer. But it's hard to get someone committed to really doing that every week at the level that is going to have engagement for our youth to want to come. And so we're extremely thankful that these people have committed and blocked off 10 hours of their time to do that on a paid basis, right? And so it's as you know, certainly I think Carter explained it well that, you know, we're not shifting to just paying people for the sake of paying people. But if there's a need and there's an important role that's not being fulfilled, and we don't think a volunteer can give it the commitment or the level of attention it needs, that there might be consideration for that. And we don't have a specific role that we're even saying that for. I'm just.
That's a good question. That is a good question, Art, and I think that's something we need to continue to navigate. Do you feel like that answered that enough? Okay, it's a good start. Yeah. Conversation isn't over.
I guess I just have a question about the changing the length of how long the people on council are going to serve. We did touch on it a little bit about a potential that it could be hard to get people to be willing to serve for that 3 years instead of 2. I could definitely see how it would be helpful in navigating the process and feeling like you can work more efficiently the longer you do it. But yeah, I guess, could I get like, how do I want to word this? Could you talk more about the process of navigating that issue in particular, about there possibly being trouble getting people willing to serve for even longer on council? And should we be worried about that?
So that's a valid point that I brought up on council also. For myself, a 2-year term initially seemed daunting, and I didn't actually want to do it. But I've noticed the more you get involved and the longer you're on council, the better relationships you have, the more trust you have with other people. You can make better decisions, and you actually stay on longer. So like Amy's just finishing up her 6th year. I'll be finishing up my 4th year. Janice just did 6 years, and we've had a lot of that. So we look at most people that are going to spend 2 years, they're going to stay past the 2 years. So 3 seems like a big commitment, but most of the people that are committing to the 2 years are staying much longer than the 2 years.
Do you want to say anything, Jay?
That's the big point. Is that most of the people are more worried about getting 6 years in than they do that off. You know, that's still important to people. The other ones are what you said is. Yeah. Now that I'm getting long-winded, that yeah, like the big thing is that most people do 6 and sometimes take a year off and then go back and do another 6. And then you really start to develop leaders that understand and that can be patient with the decision making. They know the rules, they've got a better feel for it. And that's what we're trying to develop, is that kind of continuity for the church. They don't get thrown around as much. I agree that to say first time that 3 years, that sounds like a long time. In the real world or the world outside, it used to be that municipal elections, we're in one now, that your term was 3 years. They changed it to 4 years, and we all said, we were going to quit. We're not going to do that for 4 years. Well, we all did it and turned around and did it again. Because once you get into it, if you probably got into it because you thought you were interested, but if you find out, once you find out the amount of good you can do, and that it's a I expect for what I'm seeing with this group, is they're starting to walk with God, and they're starting to be part of a bigger thing, and they're starting to get the ebb and flow in that. And you need that length of time to be able to do that. You know, it's a natural thing that happens, and this helps to guarantee that, or I'm not sure guarantee is the right word, but works towards that. Well, that was from you.
So I just have a question / suggestion based off of that, because I don't know if there's already something in place. Is there kind of a intro session type thing that people could attend if they were considering council? That they could kind of get a quick idea of what council is about and what like they would be expected to do before accepting that nomination, if that makes sense.
The quick answer is I don't think we have anything formally set up that way, but I think it would be helpful for people that are nominated to be a little more informed on their decision. So thank you for that suggestion.
I was trying to get Brad to answer. Amy will answer for me then.
Now, I don't know if anybody in here has been on the nominating committee, but I do know there is some stuff now, like when people are nominated, they're given a copy of the bylaws, they're given a copy of policies to go through, they're given kind of a job description of what council does do.
Lately that PCCM is a great need right now, and especially if we're going to focus on deeper, vibrant relationships in church. Part of that is PCCM, and how are we going to invest in that and help them and make it a bigger committee, because they say they're small and can't do it all on their own, and they'd love to have more people on board. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to appeal to our congregation who might not even know there's such a need? And just, yeah.
Alan, do you want to speak to this, or would you like me to share what my first thoughts are? I'm right here. Would you like to speak to this? Or? Okay. I'll just speak to. So obviously, James just joined the Pastoral Care Corps Ministry. He hasn't been to a meeting yet, but he will. So there will be additional staff input. And I know there has been, it is a challenge with a small committee to figure out how to care well for people. The way that we right now are seeking to navigate that is PCCM deals with more than just the care of people. And because of that, it isn't necessarily, there are a lot of caring people who wouldn't necessarily want to be on PCCM, if you know what I mean. Because, sometimes, even they're just people who are caring are like hands-on, helping, present, but not necessarily find joy in committees. I don't know if I can say that. And so one of the ways that we've been navigating that recently is to try to clarify a structure that looks a little bit more like there being a point person that maybe already exists in the life of someone who is in our church body, and to clarify if that person already exists for someone who is going through something hard, let's say a health crisis or something, and then to partner with that person in communication as opposed to trying to build a relationship that doesn't exist between someone who's part of PCCM with someone who's now in a space of need, to utilize that relationship that already exists and then to support that person who has the energy to invest in the relationship already, the history, to invest in the person who's in need, or going through a season of need or whatever. However, that's something that we've recently been navigating, and so it has not been, complete in its effectiveness and fluidity. But certainly with Pastor James on board now too, there is more space to invest in there. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Watch out, guys. PCCM. All right, thanks.
Biblical stuff, and then you use that as our example publicly, because we have so many new people here. I'm sure they haven't a clue what anything is that goes on behind the scenes. And I just think that if you had some teaching on that as a point of interest, more than, hey, everybody, we need volunteers here, not that kind of solicitation, but,
You mean to say, even just to inform people about PCCM, inform that there's care that needs happening and that maybe, people with gifts could serve in that way?
about what it is to be Jesus to other people who say, now, for example, here's the way it could look, or,
Right.
Just sort of really low-key, but
Right.
educational at the same time.
So what you're saying is, Jane, like using the gatherings to equip people for the scattered life of caring for one another. But I say that in jest, or in, you know what I did. But to let those care needs to be part of the equipping that we do of the body.
Have somebody go up there and say, hey, you know what, we need youth leaders, we need this, we need that, at different times. And when our announcements are not done so, rigidly any longer, and they're in different formats, then the question to me is, how are we letting anybody know what the needs are? And I don't know.
Right. I'm going to sit on that. But thank you, Jane. Mm-hmm.
We got a question on our text line. We got a text line. What exactly does a PCCM do? Like, what are their responsibilities? How do they serve?
Alan? Would you like to answer this, Alan? Alan is the recently appointed core ministry leader, so this is a good test, but he's doing a great job.
I think I'm going to flunk. We have a usual blurb at the beginning of our thing. I don't have it memorized, but it involves care for the spiritual health of the church, care for the people in the church. What else? Teaching the different classes regarding baptism, communion, and membership. Benevolence and counseling. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Did I answer that? Oh, right, it wasn't your question. It was a text question. Right.
Any other thoughts or questions before we close off tonight? Okay, I'm going to close in prayer. God, we're thankful for what you're doing here, for what you've done here in the past, and we're just excited about this new season of ministry that's upon us, with Carter and James in their new roles, and the other staff as well. And I just pray that as our congregation, we can come alongside them and just help them, encourage them, and that ultimately your will be done here. And just thank you for everybody that serves and those who are looking to come and join us in serving, and just, bless the things that you have ahead for us. Just guide us and bring us home safely tonight. In your name, amen.